XDefiant is still shit. Hey there everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am Doodleman149, and I assume most of you are here since you watched the previous video on XDefiant back when it was in beta. So I'm here today to look back over the points I made in my previous video and see if they still hold up today after the official release and after I spent a long evening playing it with my buddy. Let's hop into this. First things first, let's take a look at the gameplay. Keep in mind, I'll be replaying snippets of my old video to compare my previous thoughts to my current thoughts. The gameplay. The first thing I'll look at is the general gameplay. At its core, XDefiant is a hero shooter. It's an FPS title with different factions that each have different abilities to bring into play. For example, the Phantoms faction is focused on defensive shields while Libertad is focused on healing. TTK ranges from extremely fast to painfully slow. The game is more about positioning and gunplay more than mobility, despite movement being quicker than average for a game like this. All in all, if you think of the phrase first-person shooter, this is the most basic version of that thought. Guns are customizable, shooting is alright, and deaths are fast and frequent. It doesn't do anything drastic to shake up the formula, and while some people can see that as a positive, for me, it doesn't justify its own existence on this front. The gameplay is still generic fare. There's faction abilities that add the smallest amount of flavor to gunfights, but it's mostly bullshit we've seen in other shooters. Deployable cover, cloaking, etc. The shooting feels alright. Attachments definitely make a difference in how guns feel, but that's basically Modern Warfare 2019 in a nutshell. Still derivative, still boring. The netcode. Next, we'll look at the netcode. While I'm not exactly very well versed on how servers work and how things work on the technical end of it, as a gamer, I could tell you when something behind the scenes is fucking up. Numerous times I get killed well behind a corner, and I do the same to enemies at times too. Now, this isn't for thin cover that bullets could potentially go through, this is solid, impenetrable cover. Come to think of it, I'm not even sure there is bullet penetration. I think it's just bullets passing through objects that they shouldn't be able to. On top of that, in straight up firefights, there's times I'll be shooting an enemy and either not get hit markers, or when I do and lose, the enemy hasn't lost any health. Add to that the fact that shooting vibration cuts in and out at random, and you'll have less than a pleasant experience on this FPS title on a technical level. If they delayed the game for this long to fix things and this is how well it runs, I'm wondering what they were actually spending their money and time on. What can I really say about the netcode? It feels pretty much the same as it was when it was in beta. I'm shot around corners, I'm getting hit markers with no damage, bullets that clearly hit are not registering, it's a mess and it's embarrassing. The maps. Next, we'll look at the maps, and we'll also be seeing my first legitimate praise for this game. Every map I played Domination on was small. None of them were particularly large or complex, and that lends itself well to the instant respawns of the game mode. Now, with that praise out of the way, let's look at why the maps are also ass. They're all basically the same. Some maps have some variety in verticality, meaning a single floor with the same floor plan as the one above it, but they're all the same on a fundamental level. They're all simple 3-lane maps with very little deviation in those lanes and no power positions to speak of. There's nothing to fight for outside of the occasionally poorly placed objectives, and the maps themselves are too simple. In addition to the simplicity of layout, there's also simplicity in interaction, as in there is none of it. There's no doors to open or close, burst through, no environmental hazards or destruction, not even cosmetically, and there's nothing to discover. The simplicity of the maps is both a benefit for some game modes for size, while also being the most boring and generic layouts I've come across in a long time. I think only Shipment is more basic than these maps. Now, here's a small change. There are some maps I played on that feel better than the beta offerings. Basically, all of the beta maps were very similar, very linear, 3-lane static maps. I even got to play some of those post-launch, like Poblito and Dumbo, which fits its name perfectly. One decent example, however, was Echelon HQ, which still had the 3-lane structure, but there was good interplay between the lanes and a neat flanking route. However, the maps in general are still static and unexciting to play. The graphics. Let's take a look at the graphics now, and I know your eyes are going to regret it. They are hideous. Looking at the environments and character models, they look last gen. Hell, Halo 2 looks better from the 360 in some areas. Even the weapon models are muddy and seem to lack definition. I don't know anything about the Snowdrop engine, but graphically it's from a bygone era. The thing is, it doesn't even seem intentionally off like Deep Rock Galactic or Borderlands. Those games have a definitive art style that suits them. XDefiant is just ugly as sin. I mean, what can I say? You've already seen with the background footage that this remains an issue. On top of this, there are awful rendering problems on some maps. My biggest instance was here on an escort match, where the background rendered worse than damned Ark Survival Evolved. My buddy even reported that terrible rendering in the actual map itself. Innovations. So, where does XDefiant innovate? Where does it separate itself from the pack and really make a name for itself? Well, to put it bluntly, it doesn't. It's derivative in literally every sense of the word, but I'll give some concrete examples. Strict gunplay and movement style, it is copy and paste Black Ops 3. Not a single weapon is unique or interesting. Customization is basically a watered down gunsmith from Modern Warfare 2019. The abilities are all things we've seen before, from deployable cover, medpacks, proximity sensors, etc. Nothing on offer here is unique. Maps scream old COD, but not in a good way. I've already mentioned why they suck earlier. The only thing that's unique is that all the factions are from other Ubisoft titles, but none of them are iconic characters. Imitation may be the sincerest form of flattery, but when it's done in such a blatantly derivative and subpar quality as this, it comes off more as an insult. Yeah, there's still nothing new here. As I mentioned before, the gunplay is straight Blops 3, Gunsmith is Modern Warfare 2019, and abilities are versions of things that we've all seen before. It's trying to sell its old school style and lack of innovation as something that's innovative. It's a paradoxical goal to strive for, and one that I think should be abandoned. Longevity. So what are my thoughts on the longevity of this game? Well, if it releases like this, even with all the bugs and the hit reg fixed, this game is boring from the get-go. Sure, there will be attachments to grind, granted attachments that are exactly the same across all weapons, but that's also kind of a self-defeating cycle. You'll have to play the generic shooter to unlock attachments to make the generic shooter more bearable. And I have a feeling, given that it's a free-to-play game, that the content they'll add down the road will most likely be just cosmetics. I am not anticipating any new maps, any quality adjustments to the gunplay, new factions, or new weapons to come from Copy-Paste the Studio, otherwise known as Ubisoft. As it stands, and despite how cliched this sounds, this game feels like it'll be dead on arrival. I heard some people on my teams during the server test talk about how stellar the game was, and I could only assume they haven't played any shooter from the past 6 years. Some may have fun with it, but that novelty wears off as it does with everything new. When that time comes, what will they be left with? Just the trite derivative trash that XDefiant is turning out to be. Now here's an actual point where I was incorrect. There is future content scheduled for the game that includes new guns and maps. That part I was mistaken in. However, the rest of my sentiments regarding the longevity of this game still stand. There's plenty of people I see online talking about how the game lacks content and is growing stale. It's barely been out for 3 months and it's already on life support. Sure, people will continue to feed it money as there's always cash cows ripe for the milking, but the game needs a wider appeal, which I just don't feel it has. Even if it's free to play, it's still not worth the time spent playing it. And so, to answer the thumbnail question, was I wrong? Absolutely not. The game remains painfully unoriginal, and a vast majority of my previous points still stand. The gameplay is generic and derivative. The netcode is some of the worst I have ever experienced, even worse than Battlefield 2042 in some cases. The maps are boring and simple with mild deviation from this on a couple of maps. It is still ugly as sin, it doesn't innovate, and it simply doesn't have the content or the draw to continue to sustain its unjustified existence. It's still one of the most generic shooter offerings out there, and it is not worth your money or, more importantly, your time. With that, I've been Doodleman149. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you later.